Botani Makaya, and welcome to the Daily Service Delivery Gauge on SABC 1 via SABC News. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Igama lami Griselda Lewis.
Simbingelela sinamkele and I'm your host umxolisi wakwaMasango. Now siyajabula ukuba nani kulo hlelo lethu lapho sihlobwe sihlaziya khona ezokhetho just ahead of the local government elections scheduled for the 1st of November. Remember, this is your show and we encourage you to interact with us on all of our social media platforms. You can tweet us on @SABC News using hashtag #SDGauge, hashtag SABC News. And today's question is, are candidates using social media effectively to campaign amid COVID-19? You can also send us your WhatsApp voice notes and video clips to 083-272-8341. Now this is the Wednesday edition of the Service Delivery Gauge, and with that we say welcome to it. Here's where we start. We take a look at how political parties have been using social media spaces as they canvass for votes. SABC producer Lebohang Sejake has more.
As local government elections draw near, South African political parties have suddenly become blindingly visible in efforts to get majority votes. However, the pandemic has changed the game of canvassing. There have been limitations to certain methods, like door-to-door engagements with civilians. But having that we live in the digital age, some political parties like the DA say that they have embraced online platforms as an alternative for campaigning during these tough times. We have also seen political parties leverage social media platforms. Recently, the EFF and the ANC have hosted talks on Twitter Spaces. Leader of One SA movement, Musi Maimane, says that they too have largely benefited from this particular platform and in fact, according to him, have held the largest Twitter Spaces in the country.
For us, Spaces is not a new thing. We've pioneered the thing. In fact, we've held the largest space in South Africa and Africa. You know, we had massive audience participation. We've crashed the platform a few times, and now really, so we've built an online community. We do My Money Mondays, which have been happening over the last 3 months, and we've had a diversity of guests. We've had people from Advocate Ngugai Toby to Dalimpo, to Chamisa, to Nikki Newton-King, just a variety of guests, Vusi Tembegwayo. And now we're getting to the end of saying, now let's talk about some of the issues that are pertinent to people on the ground. And so it's become a massive platform for us.
The social media trend of campaigning has seen exponential growth over the years. However, the latter can be more appealing to millennials and Gen Zs who don't have time to sit through long speeches in campaign rallies, for instance.
We've seen a lot of trends where political party leaders, political party members, those in senior leadership positions within a given political party, obviously pushing or following the trend with the new, obviously, millennials and the Generation Z type people wanting to consume almost everything online. So we've seen a lot of people setting up social media accounts. Some of them are individual accounts. Some of them are obviously political party pages or accounts where every member who is authorized, obviously, can post in that group. We are also seeing a lot of engagements, be it news events that have happened in the day, just the political framework of this country, especially being debated quite intensively online on social media platforms like Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and at times with even Instagram, we've seen people share their images, but also we've also seen a lot of images being shared on YouTube and TikTok.
But the country's high data costs are still an issue, especially for audiences who would be interested in being part of these online political engagements.
Difficulty is that, My mother is not going to listen to a Twitter space. She'll tell you, I don't have data for that. You know what I mean? So you've got to deal with that. And you often find young people are the ones with data to spend on things like that.
As the country moves closer to local government elections, citizens will continue seeing the presence of political parties, whether physical or in the digital world, on platforms such as Twitter Spaces. In putting together the story, we reached out to the ANC and the EFF to get their perspective on this particular subject. However, our requests fell on deaf ears.
Your party is being accused of being racially insensitive and out of touch, Mr. Steenhuisen, for actually putting that up. If you say the ANC called them racist, who exactly did the ANC call racist? Let's speak
let's be specific about who the ANC called racist. Let's be specific how other parties marched through Phoenix holding up posters saying that all Indians are racist. Who stereotyped that community in Phoenix? It was Beki Cele, it was Zandile Gumedi, it was Jomo Sabia, it was everyone in the ANC who painted that entire community with the same brush. Yes, there were vigilantes in that community, and the law must take its course. That's what I'm saying. They're not my heroes. They didn't defend the rule of law. They didn't defend the Constitution. They took the law into their own hands.
What do you think the families of those that lost their loved ones are going to say when they see up those posters where you say people that killed their loved ones are heroes?
I didn't say the people who killed loved ones are heroes. Do not put words in my mouth.
The DA has had racial issues within your own ranks. You've had racial issues, particularly tweets of your current federal chairperson, Helen Zille. And it's issues that have been raised in the party that you are battling with race. And for the DA to put up such a poster, which clearly signifies that you are targeting a particular race for their votes, further fueling the ideal that you are perpetuating racial divisions in the country.
It's simply not true. It's simply not true. The heroes are black, white, Indian and coloured South Africans who stood up for the rule of law. The president himself called those South Africans heroes.
Why didn't you put up that poster up in Soweto where last September was protecting Mapanya
Because
more?
It's a KZN campaign and KZN are running that particular issue.
Why put it in Phoenix? Because it further fuels racial tension.
It's going to be going up in places around Durban.
And as the political environment heats up and tensions increase ahead of the local government poll, citizens need to be educated about misinformation and disinformation. So Media Monitoring Africa says disinformation has the potential to destroy democracies and poses a clear threat to free and fair elections. So how do you guard against misinformation and disinformation on social media? Media Monitoring Africa's Azola Taile joins me now live. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Taile. Thanks indeed for your time. So what is the difference between mis and disinformation?
All right, Griselda, thank you very much for having me on the show. So, Siswami, to begin with, the difference between mis and disinformation is around intent. So let me give a definition of what disinformation is. Disinformation is the deliberate generation and dissemination of false information with the intent to cause harm. So within this context of elections, this intent could be to affect the outcomes of the elections or to affect participation in the elections. With misinformation, however, the truth is the inverse. So with misinformation, still there is a false and deliberate generation and dissemination of false information. However, there is intent there that is absent. You understand? So that is primarily the difference between dis and misinformation.
In the run-up to the 2019 local government elections, Media Monitoring Africa had picked up an uptick in incidents of misinformation and disinformation. What are you picking up currently in the run-up to November's poll?
As you say, Griselda, indeed, in 2019 we did monitor the general elections, and we have found that during this time of elections there are heightened emotions and feelings, and therefore a lot of disinformation coming through, content such as xenophobic, hateful content coming through, content that is geared towards the harassment of journalists. These are things that we have picked up in 2019, but we are also gradually starting to see now as we are going towards the election day, which is 1st November. It hasn't been much or major, but it is sort of like picking up. As you know, we are currently within the COVID-19 pandemic, yes, and most of the disinformation that we've been getting on the Real 411 platform has been geared towards COVID-19 and vaccines. Yes. But now, because we are within the elections period, we are starting to in fact see a rise in elections-related disinformation and misinformation.
And how do we curb this? Because Media Monitoring Africa does say this could be a threat to free and fair elections and to democracy as a whole. How do you curb this?
No, definitely. I mean, the onus should be definitely on the platforms itself, on themselves, but obviously we know not to trust platforms or not to just give them that leeway to regulate by themselves.
Yes.
So we as Media Monitor, what we do then, we are currently working with the IEC, and we have developed a complaints platform that is called Real 411.
Yes.
In that platform, when they encounter alleged instances of dis or misinformation, information that they are wary of, they can lodge a complaint on Real 411, and then the digital complaints committee that makes up Real 411 which is made up of a tech specialist, a media specialist, and a law specialist, will then decipher whether it is indeed this misinformation or hate speech or any other thing, and then we also send it to the IEC to also make deliberations on themselves and to see whether there are sanctions to be made on the person that posted the disinformation or the post itself. Usually it's either to take down the post from the platform, or if there are criminal elements to it, then we go to
certainly very important work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
But
very quickly,
yes, very quickly. So we're also encouraging political parties to upload their campaign material, whether it's posters, videos, or audio, on our Padre system. It's a political ad repository that we have created in order for the public to be able to distinguish, the fake and manipulated posters and the real posters, because what we see during elections is that there is a lot of manipulated posters that come from official political parties, but people then go and manipulate them. So we are saying that they should upload their material on the site, and we'll disseminate it.
Any complaints very quickly about the DA posters, the current furore that's taking place? Any complaints?
I haven't personally seen that complaint. Yes, I haven't personally seen that complaint myself, but I'm sure that there is. I mean, I'm not sure whether it would be mis or disinformation. That's not for me to decide, but I can say definitely that it is quite an despicable and racist poster.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Important work that you're doing during this time as Media Monitoring Africa. Media Monitoring Africa's Azola Daile. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So a little bit earlier on, we've been asking you, are candidates using social media effectively to campaign, considering that we're still in the COVID-19 pandemic and those restrictions are still in place? We're taking a look at some of those tweets. All right, let's take a look at some of those tweets that are coming up. That one says, from Azola, says, oh yes indeed. Azola Mlojwa saying, oh yes indeed, that's just come up now. If you also want to participate, hashtag SABC News, hashtag SD Gauge Daily, and hashtag SA Decides 2021. We'll bring some more tweets up, but a lot of engagement there, Kolisi, about what political parties are doing at this particular time. We see the current furore around the Democratic Alliance, the posters that were put up relating to Phoenix, and we'll hear a lot more from your engagements at the moment. Trying to get our team to bring those up, but all right. All right, we'll bring up some of those tweets just very shortly. Our team trying to get them up and running, but let's move on to this story as well that has caused quite an uproar. Enoch Mgijima local municipality in the Eastern Cape has come under scrutiny for a multi-million rand stadium and sports field recently opened in Lesserton. So images of the official opening of the stadium on the municipality's Facebook page sparked an outrage online, and the post has since been deleted. The post showed the grass with brown patches and steel poles that did not have nets. However, the municipality maintains that the 15 million rand cost of that is justifiable due to the work involved in that project.
So now the use of social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube is emerging as an important electoral campaigning tool. Understanding the electoral power of social media could prove very rewarding for political parties, particularly in the lead up to the local government elections. We're now joined virtually by SABC News research editor Dr. Ronesh Dauraj. Ronesh, it's great to have you on the daily service delivery gauge to you. Oh, a very good afternoon to you. Ronesh, now with the election campaigning in full swing and during a global pandemic, are South African political parties using social media effectively?
Hi, good afternoon, Alicia, and thanks for inviting me to your show. Well, I think South African politicians and South African parties have missed the boat quite a number of times. The use of social media was very low from 2011 onward. I think the first party that actually jumped onto the social media bandwagon back then was the ANC to a certain degree, then the DA. But 2014 was the first full election that the DA and other bigger parties kind of use social media. But only the big players are actually leveraging the power and the reach of social media. In the 2016 local government elections, we had the ANC in full swing, we had the DA in full swing, and obviously the EFF's first local government election, because the party formed in 2013. If we look at the follower base on a site such as Twitter, the ANC currently has around 1 million followers on Twitter, the DA 662,000, and the EFF is right on top with 1.5 million. And then there's also this argument that South African politics has not matured to a level where it's more about the party than the leader. We are very personality driven. So if you look at leaders like the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, his followership on Twitter, on a site such as Twitter, is around 2 million. The DA's John Steenhuisen, the leader of the DA, is 176,000. And very interestingly, the federal chair of the DA has a followership of 1.4 million. But right on top is the EFF. Yes, the EFF has a lot of pull, especially with the youth, with the young voters, with people who are very techno-savvy. The EFF sits with 3.6 million followers exclusively on Twitter. And obviously they're on YouTube and other platforms such as Facebook as well, Instagram as well. But I think the reason why Twitter is so important is because there's a number of reasons. Musi Maimane spoke about live spaces that Twitter has introduced recently, which is going to be beneficial, absolutely beneficial for these elections where, we're functioning during the pandemic. So obviously those walkabouts, those town hall debates are not going to happen as often as it used to be. So I think political parties, I think they need to, get on with it and actually come on board and use social media, because television, radio will always be there, print will always be there, but I think social media needs to be used more.
Yeah, Ronesh, and we'd also like to know, perhaps maybe if you can also tell us, I know you've touched on live spaces and other things, but I want to know, what other reasons should political parties and independents be using social media for in the race to the November 1 local government elections?
Khaleesi, I think the first point I have to make is that, remember, elections are very, very expensive. The ANC in the last election, I think Nombula Mokonyane just slipped somewhere, to slip up the tongue. She was on a campaign trail. She says the ANC spent around 1 billion. Now, the ANC doesn't have that kind of money. Neither does the DA or any other party for that matter. So the first reason, one of 6 reasons that the political parties in South Africa need to leverage social media at the soonest time possible is that it's free, unmediated media. So basically, you don't pay for it. You pay for certain things like political ads on places like YouTube and Facebook and those kind of spaces. But especially on Twitter, it's free, unmediated space that you need, especially around an election. The second thing is that it is multimedia. It offers you audio, it offers you video, it offers you live spaces, like we spoke about earlier on. It offers you text. It also offers you imaging when you are putting out those tweets, when you're putting out your political messaging. Then the third very important thing is that, remember, despite us living in the COVID pandemic, the media cannot be everywhere. The media also is a scarce resource. They can't be with every politician in every nook and cranny of the country. So therein comes social media and the use of cell phones, smartphone technology. So with smartphone technology, your campaign can be, beamed out and broadcast to all your followers on all your platforms, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and then obviously, another very important point is that lots of news personnel, lots of journalists are present on these social media platforms. So anything a political party says or a politician says, it grabs the attention of the media. So politicians use media on these platforms very strategically, because they know that they are looking out for stories. And obviously sentiment analysis as well. Politicians want feedback, and social media offers instant feedback. And when you get that feedback, like what we saw with the DA and the posters in Phoenix, Durban, obviously they're going to adjust their campaign accordingly. So sentiment analysis is very important. And then the last one obviously is audience segmentation. The youth is very important, especially to a party like the EFF. You've got smartphone technology. The only issue for the EFF is that they're reaching out to the youth, but that segment of the voter population is not registered to vote in an election. And I think the same danger is going to happen with these elections as well. The EFF appeals to the youth. They've got this huge followership on following on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and all the other platforms. But those people need to be registered to actually come out on voting day and vote for that party. And then obviously, a space like Twitter has been proven to be an urban space, and the metro vote is very, very important. In South Africa, 41% of the registered voting population actually resides in the metros. So the ANC and the DA even confessed in 2016 that they went on Twitter specifically to target the metro urban voter who's technologically savvy, who's well educated, who's progressive in their thinking. So that huge treasure trove of voters is what the ANC, EFF, DA, and other parties should actually be targeting using social media.
Ronesh, before we let you go, I want to know, is there too much information being sent out to voters?
Sadly, Khaleesi, I think there is too much. Obviously, every morning when we get up, the first thing we do is we grab our phones, we look at Twitter, we look at Facebook, we look at Instagram, we look at news sites. So there is a bombardment of lots of information, and we don't get enough time to process that information. So lots of times, context doesn't form part of our reading. So when that context doesn't form part of our reading, there's lots of misinformation and disinformation. And because technology has empowered people like myself, people like the older generation, people don't read enough before forwarding that message over WhatsApp or whatever forum. So that context misses. And then obviously there is the danger of information fatigue. The danger of information fatigue is disengagement with the political processes. So that leads to voter apathy. And obviously we're getting competing technologies. So even to grab the attention of the youth these days, it's so difficult.
Okay, that is, of course, SABC News research editor Dr. Ronesh Daraj joining us there on the line. Thank you so much for your time. Now, as the viewer earlier in the show, we invited you, our viewer, to send us your views regarding the question of the day. Are candidates using social media effectively to campaign amid COVID-19? Let's take a look what our viewers have to say.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the tweets that are coming up. Let's take a look there.
Yeah. And of course, we saw the famous hashtag. It's Mkolisi and Criselda. We see you, Shorty. Hey, we see you there.
Mkolisi and Criselda. Thanks, Shorty, for getting in touch with us. We see you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to one of our other tweets as well. Colin Sindelele says, only the EFF candidates so far have been marketing themselves eloquently and effectively on social media so far, even going at length as introducing a Twitter space whereby leaders interact with their constituencies. My vote goes out to them come November. Hashtag SABC News. Thanks, Collins, for getting in touch with us.
Do we have another tweet? Yes, God's woman says, nope, they are the worst at using social media because they politicize everything, and that's where the market is.
God's woman, thank you very much for getting in touch with us once again. Lots of social media engagement on our topics as we continue. Pindi is next, saying, considering the fact that social media is the most effective form of reaching out to voters during this time, most parties are using the platform in the most correct way, especially the EFF. They have my vote. All right.
Wow, thank you so much for your participation on all of our social media platforms. This is where we end the Wednesday edition of the Service Delivery Gauge, the Daily Show.
Service Delivery Gauge. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. I'm Criselda Lewis.
And I'm Mkolisi Masango. Till tomorrow, take care.
We'll see you again. Good night.